Ciao everyone and welcome to episode number 7 of Voices of Italy Beyond la Dolce Vita, the podcast that explores what it really means to be Italian today. In this episode in particular, we're going to talk about what it means to be a young Italian or to live in Italy as a young person. Some people might call this a first world problem, but being young in Italy is not easy at all, believe me. And Italy has a quite conflicting relationship with its youth. This country definitely needs more young people, but strangely enough, young people often feel rejected and unwanted, not only for a job market that simply doesn't offer any stability, but also for dominant older generations that simply don't seem to care. In this episode, we discuss why people in 2025 Italy are basically an endangered species, living their best dolce vita until it's time to leave for better opportunities. And stay tuned until the end because this time it's not just me talking. I hit the streets and asked Italians how they feel about the situation of the youth. And some of the answers might surprise you. Italy is one of the most iconic countries in the world. But what does Italy mean to the world? What does it mean to you?
Buongiorno.
Pizza,
Ciao Bella.
Michelangelo.
spaghetti,
Mafia.
Dolce Vita.
My name is Alessia, I'm Italian, and this is Voices of Italy, the podcast that peels back the layers of the Instagram perfect Italy to reveal everyday stories of authentic, surprising, and messy Italian life. The decline of young people in Italy is no news at all. If you're Italian, you've heard this so many times that it doesn't even sound like a big deal anymore. If you're from another developed country, you might think you got more or less the same problem where you come from and that it's just a world thing. But at the cost of sounding arrogant here, I really doubt that most of you know how daunting it can actually be to be a young person in Italy. As I have mentioned in some of the previous episodes, Italy has an aging population problem due to both declining birth rate and a massive brain drain going on, which have both been a sore spot in Italian society for a long time. No, it's not certainly a recent matter. Many young Italians struggle to become independent, and many more feel like they have no future in their own country. So they decide to leave. Let's start with some numbers. According to the latest figures, over a million of Italians left the country from 2013 to 2022 only in that period. It's a massive emigration that kicked off with the financial crisis of 2008 and it basically never stopped since. Just between 2022 and 2023 alone, 100,000 young people between 18 and 34 years old left the country, and just a third within the same demographic came back within the same time frame. I know it already sounds like a lot of numbers that, okay, I agree that they do not necessarily communicate the full pictures, but the truth is that these figures are probably even higher in reality, considering that many Italians emigrating keep their residence in Italy for fiscal or bureaucratic reasons. But let me take a little step back. The non Italians among the listeners might wonder, if we're talking about Italians that are emigrating, what does it mean that they keep their residence in Italy? This sounds completely natural and understanding to an Italian person, but let me explain something uh, from the amazing world of Italian public administration. In Italy, residenza, your residence, refers to a person's official legal residence, meaning the place where someone habitually lives and where they are registered within the local municipality. So, From a fiscal perspective, residency determines where a person is taxed. But there are also other important aspects of people's life, like, for example, it determines where your family doctor is, which is Italians' main healthcare provider in daily life. And also, it's the only place where you have the right to vote. So, your residenza is directly connected to those two things, for example. So, if your legal residence is in Rome, your family doctor must be in Rome. And if there's an election, you must be in Rome for you to exercise your right to vote. So when Italian citizens move abroad for over 12 months, they are supposed to register with AIRE, the registry of Italians residing abroad, and it's supposed to serve as a record for consular services, voting rights, tax residency statuses, these kind of things. Italy has had massive waves of immigration since the late 19th century, with millions of Italians moving abroad. It was so significant that there was a need to track citizens outside of Italy in sort of a centralized way. And that's when AIRE was introduced to keep this updated record of Italians abroad. And also, of course, ensure their voting rights, because in Italy, Italians abroad elect their own members of the parliament. It's a very peculiar thing, even in Europe. So some Italians move abroad and avoid registering in AIRE, mostly to avoid bureaucratic issues, complications with re entering in Italy or obtaining certain documents or dealing with banking and tax matters from a long distance can be really, really, really problematic. But it's probably also a lack of clarity about tax obligations in their new country, and also lack of awareness, because many Italians, especially students or short term workers, don't even know about the AIRE registration being required. So it's just one of those things that the numbers that we have about Italians abroad are probably even higher for this reason. But why is this happening? This decades long phenomena, of course, leads to a massive decline of the number of people in working age, which has had a particularly bad impact on Italy's productivity. And it's also the reason why many economic scholars and policymakers, for example, suggest that we should introduce policies to increase migrant workers, for example. But that's definitely not a sexy thing to support as an Italian politician today. So we stick with our decline before opening to more migrants. That's how the mood is around here. The reasons why young people leave are actually extremely clear, both from a studies and data point of view, but also socially speaking, because in people's minds there are really a few things that all of us more or less see as actual problems. So wages are stagnant. Italy has the lowest average salaries in the entire European Union. So young professionals earn even less today than they did in the early 2000s, and there's job insecurity that's really the norm, with temporary contracts, unpaid internships, forcing many people to stay dependent on their families and living with them. But there's also a general feeling of hopelessness, to be honest, especially towards our political class that rarely prioritizes youth policies. That's obvious because young people represent a minority among the voters, so older generations dominate the political agenda and the job market in general. Young people in Italy are the most underpaid demographic, really. Almost one in four young people under 30 years old makes less than €9 an hour before taxes. Like, this is, again, figures do not give you a complete idea, of course, of how society is, but they go very close. If you're in the South, it's even worse. All of it, everything I've said so far about jobs and salaries, worse. much worse. So the first thing that comes to mind, I guess, for almost every Italian when talking about the brain drain is this the job insecurity that makes it nearly impossible for young workers to build a stable life. And I've seen that happening with a lot of people close to me. It was my situation as well. My current job, I got it when I was 30, and it was my first permanent contract. Before that, I worked in a little jewelry store for 6 months. Then I worked in a call center for 2 years in total, but with three different contracts. It was 6 months, then 6 more months, then a year, and then they let you go because the law doesn't allow to have temporary contracts for over 2 years. Then I had another year long contract, and again, only when I got 30 years old, I had a contract that I knew was going to support me for a longer period of time. That's the problem here, the sense of insecurity that leads you to not being able to make any plans for you and your family. But I also can tell you a million stories of people that I know. Two of my dearest friends, they're a couple. She works for a big company actually, and he works in the automotive industry. They're both in their 30s, and both of them have struggled to even find a home to rent. I'm not even talking about purchasing a home, which is the dream that a lot of us can just dream about in here. But I can also think about many other people that I know in their 20s or 30s that still live with their parents, and that's not even considered something that is necessarily a problem from a human aspect. Definitely that's considered normal. There are even areas or parts of the populations that sees that as just how it's supposed to be. You don't move out of your house unless you're getting married, so you're creating a new family, and only at that point, out of necessity, you move out of your family house. So I really think it's also been ingrained in our mentality and in our sense of family. And we need to look also at how this is costing to Italy in general as a country, because recent studies are telling us, they are confirming that this brain drain already costed over 134 billions overall in the past decades. So the paradox is that many people living in Italy, many workers living in Italy, have actually profiles that are highly looked for by Italian companies, but because people find just more favorable conditions abroad to grow professionally, still that demand is not matched by the necessary offer. And that's all true. But it's really so much more complicated than all these numbers and macroeconomics issues. I personally think that a lot of this comes from other factors like toxic work environments, the total absence of career progressions, generations of people like me that are raised with the one mantra that finding a job that gives you any regular income is all you need. And so we also have, I believe, a lack of ambition in the youth. And that's because any ambition at times really sounds just unrealistic and naive, to which is not the case in a lot of other countries. You at least have a realistic expectation, or you should have a realistic expectation of growth in your adult life. The other day, I was walking around here in downtown Torino, and I saw a few job ads in some stores and local coffee bars that were honestly one of the reasons why I decided on this topic for this episode today. And it was really the perfect example encapsulating quite a few of the issues that I've discussed so far. a lot of those job signs, or even the online posts, to be honest, are mostly for seasonal jobs, or jobs maybe in hospitality, customer service. And they usually say something really simple, those ones that you can see just on the store's door, for example: seeking this kind of professional, please send your CV to these emails. And maybe there's just a couple more details, nothing more. But it's in those details that you can see actually the problems. A lot of them address specifically female candidates, for example, specifying, for example, waitress over a waiter, which is technically illegal in our country, because you're not supposed to discriminate over age or sex when you're trying to hire. And in a lot of those signs, they even request sometimes what is called in Italian bella presenza. Sometimes it's one of the few requirements listed in the job ad. And bella presenza literally means, my dear foreign listeners, good looking. So imagine walking around and finding a job ad on a store just saying seeking a waitress, good looking one, send your resume with picture here. That's literally something that you can find. Another common requirement is an age limit. I would say most commonly, I don't know, maybe under 23, or the other day I saw another one that was saying under 25 years old. Imagine how creepy it can get if you think about it when you see a job ad that has all the three requirements. So please be a girl, please be pretty, please be young. And sometimes they even had random stuff like languages fluency is required, because, the more the better, even if I'm probably going to hire you with a little underpaid internship, but that's not important, right? Okay, let's try to resist the temptation of assuming that there's a little bit of sexism coming into play here, but let's move away from that, even if I completely see the point, because there are other factors that I think can explain this kind of job ads to people that maybe don't are not really super familiar with the Italian job market. The age requirement in many cases probably comes from more of a financial convenience than anything else, because many of those job ads are for internships, as I was saying, which usually have an age requirement, or only address people who recently completed their studies. So it's just more likely that a young person falls in that category. And as I was mentioning, internships and traineeships are very, very commonly used in Italy, even to hire people in their late 20s and early 30s. Like in my case, actually, my last job before my current one, I was 29 years old, and I was hired for an internship that was paying me 600 euros per month at 29 years old. And, I remember back then it was a job that I liked in terms of the field. I worked in recruitment, and it was my first job opportunity in recruitment. So I saw, of course, the growth opportunity in there, and I tried really hard to do a good job. And it really felt like my manager and the company itself were appreciating my efforts. Things were going really well, and that's why I even tried to inquire if they were interested in keeping me in the long term, and that was never under discussion. No matter how good I was doing, no matter how much I was willing to compromise, we didn't even get to talk about money. The answer was simply no, we only hire in this internship format. So that's the case for many, many people. Internship and traineeships were originally meant to help young people to get into the job market, giving them more hands-on experience before landing a full-time role. But because in Italy, hiring someone full-time is really expensive due to the tax rate, and also, let's be honest, very strict labor protections, many employers abuse of internship and traineeships as a loophole, essentially, to get cheap labor or even free labor at times, without the cost and the responsibilities of hiring properly full time. So it's so fantastically convenient that instead of helping young people transition into the job market, into real jobs, internships in many cases today have become the job, one after the other, no end in sight. Really, some people just do internships for many years because it's the only thing that they get offered. There's not enough incentive to hire people permanently, and recently, with inflation, that didn't even help to change the salary levels that remain the same. So imagine, even more convenient for an employer to be able to sell their products at a higher price without increasing the cost of your staff. And everything I've been telling you so far, it's as true for young Italians as it is, of course, for foreigners coming here. Can you imagine? It's probably worse. I've been seeing it in my with my boyfriend's experience. As I mentioned a couple of times in the previous episodes, I live here with my boyfriend. We've been living together for the past couple of years, and unfortunately, in his situation, searching for a part-time job because that's the only thing that his current visa allows him to do as a student in one of Italy's major cities, it's unfortunately just a disappointing experience. And the surprising thing from my point of view is that my boyfriend, being American, definitely has a different approach to job search. I guess maybe Italians are not that outgoing as Americans, just culturally in general. And this is one of those cases. So you could see him just printing a bunch of CVs and walking around, stores, bars, pubs, anything that he thought, could offer a part-time or seasonal job. And that was for him obviously a sign of determination, entrepreneurship, something to be appreciated. And unfortunately, he came across people looking down on him for doing that, as if it's something weird, as if, where are you coming here in my store asking for a job? Go away. That was a not so uncommon reaction that we saw. Other people just looked at him in the eyes and said that that was a hopeless thing to do, that they were not going to call, that it was going to be difficult for him to find anything. It's not like it's not a perceived situation. There was actually a very common response, unfortunately, that he found. So it's really, I want to say, a general mentality problem that goes hand in hand with another factor, I guess, that is very problematic, which is the raccomandazione thing. I mentioned this also in the Dolce Villa episode, actually, but raccomandazione is essentially a referral, the Italian version of the referral that sometimes we don't perceive as so positive, because it seems like it's in many cases the only way to get a job. And I'm not even talking about big jobs where you can imagine there is some sort of shady things going on. Here, many times, even finding a seasonal low skill job may require that you have a friend that knows the owner of the store and can maybe let you in in the strict circle for the selection. A few of the people that are currently foreign students here in Torino that I know, and that got a couple of this kind of jobs, in most cases had the opportunity through a friend or by knowing directly the business owner or manager. That's super super common. I think it's something that we have just get used to as a country, as part of our job market. So far, I've been telling you a lot about the pragmatic issues that lead to this massive brain drain, but it's so embedded in our culture that it's part of our mindset right now. The way people talk, the way people feel towards the youth, and the way young people feel in this country. we have a word that refers to the trend of Italian young adults to basically live with their parents well into their 30s, something that is often seen as a sign of immaturity or lack of independence. And that word is mammoni. Sort of a translation could be mama's boy. And this word, it's one of the main stereotypes attached to Italians here and abroad, but it becomes quite unfair, in my opinion, when it's used to ridicule or diminish Italians or young Italians in this case, without acknowledging all the problems that I have just told you about, and basically implying that the staying in your family home until you're 35 is a choice and not a necessity. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, that there's not people doing that on purpose, or that the word in itself should be banned. I have even used it myself in the past. I'm sometimes referring to people usually emotionally very attached to their family, and that we're actually making the choice, the conscious choice to live with them despite having the opportunity or the financial stability to not to do so. My problem is when the dominant class uses this word mamoni to shake any social responsibility off their hands, and even more so when they use it in a mocking way at times. There's been many cases of condescending remarks, let's call it that way, from high level politicians, for example, that over the years have publicly labeled young Italians in ways that reflect broader social tensions and expectations. For example, I remember this famous case of the Minister of the Internal Affairs. I think it was in 2011, that referred to young Italians as mammoni really explicitly. And she used that word publicly not long after another member of the government back then used instead the word bamboccioni, still referring to young Italians, because a big topic back then was the unemployment rate in the youth. And this word bamboccioni is very similar to mammoni, but it translates more in like big babies. And both terms refer to this cultural view in Italy that young people are somehow not living up to expectation, either in their personal lives or even their careers. And it implies that they're lazy, they're too dependent on their parents, too comfortable. But it's really silly to talk as if there was no other factor, as if this was not a consequence of a general struggle to build a life outside their parents' home due to the precariousness of the job market, high unemployment, low wages, all these things. Even the former prime minister, Mario Monti, at a certain point was involved in one of these critiques because he spoke about posto fisso, which is another big deal that you have heard me mention before in the other episodes, the famous permanent job in Italy. He referred to posto fisso as monotonous. So he suggested that young people needed to let go of the dream of a permanent job and be more flexible in their careers. While his intentions, to be fair, were maybe to encourage a little more adaptability to the current job market for young people, his comments came across as completely out of touch with the reality of young Italians today who can barely secure any kind of permanent contract, let alone, a stable life outside their parents' house. Even Silvio Berlusconi once made headlines for this kind of thing. So, not just for financial and legal scandals, but for a remark that he made during a TV debate about precarity at work. There was a young woman that asked him how young couples could afford to start a family without a stable job. And he made one of his jokes, just suggesting that she should just marry the son of a wealthy person. In his word, the son of Berlusconi. This comment was seen, obviously, as a just a huge display of privilege and insensitivity towards the problems of young people. But it's just to give you an idea of how many relevant people leading our country even encourage this kind of mentality towards young people. The recurring use of these derogatory terms like mammoni, bamboccioni, just highlights the disconnect between Italian political elite and the real experience of young people. There is a deep cultural expectation that young people should follow a certain traditional path, leave their home at a certain age, get a stable job, and start a family right after. And the fact that this is, for clear factors, just very difficult has caused growing levels of anxiety in young generations, especially among university students. And this is something that we will probably talk about in another episode that, I want to dedicate a little focus on university life in Italy. But just to give you an idea also of how this impacts really our semantic, even the term giovane, so young person, but also ragazzo, ragazza, boy, girl. They're often used to refer to people in their late 30s or even in their early 40s. Can you imagine calling someone a ragazzo and they're like 38? But it really reflects the cultural nuances of what it means to be young in Italy, because you're young in the sense that you're not your own adult person yet. This sort of extension of the meaning of ragazzo, giovane, in a way also goes hand in hand with the fact that we delay our progression, not only from an aging consideration, but also from a professional point of view. There's a word in Italians that is nonnismo. I think it pretty much translates in hazing in English, and it's a term that refers to a particular type of bullying, basically, that typically happens within the military or very hierarchical environments. The word comes from nonno, which means grandfather, and refers to older, experienced members of a group subjecting newcomers or younger recruits to very tough or humiliating rituals or behaviors to prove a point, to prove that they need to earn their place. And nonnismo, I guess, it's one of those cultural parts of a Italian workplace is that you can find very much everywhere, even to uh, the entertainment world or the political world. For example, Matteo Renzi, who became Italy's prime minister in 2014, was repeatedly referred to as the young mayor, il giovane sindaco, il ragazzo di Firenze, the boy from Florence. He was 39 years old, and that was, completely accepted because he was considered much younger, obviously, than the majority of people in his field. And this highlights just how relative youth in the political sphere is. But similar things happen, as I was saying, also in the entertainment. I recently read, I think it was an interview from Alessandro Cattelan. He's a very popular showman and a TV host in Italy. And he was talking about his ambition of getting to host popular or big programs, and how much nonismo there's actually in that environment, as well. As if, you're still 40, you're too young to get access to other kind of opportunities, as if you're too young to go over handling things of a certain importance. But if it's such a huge problem, something that obviously impacts the whole country overall, are we doing something about it? Well, in the past, Italian governments have rolled out some programs that were aiming to getting young professionals back in Italy, for example. So they offer things like tax reduction and funding for startups to make it easier for young Italians to return home and building something new here, to give them a reason to come back and stay instead of seeking opportunities abroad. Unfortunately, it doesn't really look like these kind of policies have had a big impact. If any impact at all, to be honest. On the other hand, though, recently I've seen more grassroots movements involving communities that want to revitalize regions where the brain drain is even more significant, especially in the south and especially in smaller urban areas, where many people are living at even higher rates, and most importantly, there's no migrants from other places compensating this loss, which is something that instead benefits North Italy a little bit, because a lot of people from the south do not necessarily go abroad. Maybe they just move to a city in North Italy, while people that are already from North Italy usually just go directly abroad if they decide to leave their home for other opportunities. So this is something that the South doesn't have, this sort of exchange with another incoming group of migrants. And these organizations and grassroots movements try to tackle this issue. They're not just focusing on the economic, but also on raising awareness about how the youth is lack of young people is affecting local culture and communities. Some initiative help, for example, people developing local businesses that can create jobs locally, while others focus on encouraging them to invest in the future of their hometowns as a possibility. It's all about sparking a sense of pride and responsibility too. That's just as important, and showing that you don't have to leave Italy to succeed in your career or to get a stable lifestyle, because objectively, again, that sense of hopelessness that I was telling you about, it does have an impact. It's probably less measurable than other factors, but it has an impact on how Italians think about business and career, and maybe how they automatically decide that it's more worth investing on a career abroad than it would be in Italy. Sometimes it's just an automatic choice at this point for how common it is to think that there's no future in Italy. So, I've talked a lot about what it means to be young in Italy today, but I didn't want this to be just my perspective. So, in the spirit of this podcast mission, I went out and asked young Italians themselves what they think about their situation, about the issues of the youth in Italy. Some of the answers might surprise you, so let's see what they had to say. First of all, I asked people what they think are the reasons why Italians stay at home with their parents longer than in other countries in Europe, for example. And most people replied like this.
Anche semplicemente a livello di stipendio, a livello di affitti, a livello di vita in generale, comunque la vita non è che costa poco qua in Italia. A differenza però degli stranieri che vengono pagati il dovuto, nel senso tu spendi tot per la vita quotidiana e ti viene anche ripagato quel tot.
Ma perché già da un punto di vista economico è proprio difficile lasciare casa, essere indipendenti. Ad esempio anche chi studia all'università, trovarsi un lavoro, gli affitti ormai sono sproporzionati.
Sì, diciamo che da un punto di vista economico non conviene né a chi vuole uscire di casa né ai genitori che poi dovrebbero sostenere il figlio comunque fuori da casa.
Mostly economic reasons, the salaries, expensive cost of life, while in other countries, you're just paid what you're due. So even if you have to spend maybe more than what you spend here in Italy, you're compensated in a way that makes it work. But what really surprised me was the answer that you're gonna listen in a second, because I think also reveals a little bit more of cultural reasons that I was mentioning before.
Ma forse perché c'è una sicurezza maggiore, comunque rimanere a casa, ti senti un po' più nella tua zona di comfort.
Here he's talking about something completely different. He's mentioning the comfort of staying in Italy, which I believe, in a way, it's part of the reasons why this happens. But, it's a little bit the chicken of the egg. I don't know where the problem started, but it's more than just economics. It's something that is affecting people's will to leave their home. My second question was about what they think should be done to stop the brain drain of young people in Italy. And basically everybody answered with something related to salaries.
Degli stipendi adeguati, non tutti gli stage gratuiti con cui appunto non puoi mantenerti, degli orari normali, permettere anche di avere una vita a parte il lavoro, soprattutto i primi anni.
She definitely has a point. She says not only salaries, but we should get rid of those free internships that you get over and over and over that definitely don't give you any opportunity to get any sort of stability whatsoever. But there was another answer that I was really glad to get someone from the South, like me, who's proposing something a little different.
Sicuramente favorire comunque anche attraverso finanziamenti magari nazionali, diciamo le università del sud, in particolare sono di Palermo, quindi comunque mi riguarda, quindi aprire molto, diciamo, dare più possibilità anche attraverso degli scambi magari comunque sia tra il sud che il nord, in modo tale che anche alcuni magari delle università del nord, alcuni studenti possano capire anche l'importanza del sud a livello anche culturale.
She's saying that we should invest in universities in South Italy because, of course, those are the ones that are struggling right now to get new students because people move, if anything, from the south to the north, but the opposite just doesn't happen. So it would be good to invest in initiatives that allow people from North Italy to understand the cultural value of South Italy. And that's actually a great answer, I believe. I think encouraging and stimulating the internal exchange could already be maybe not the definitive solution to the problem, but a great improvement. With my last question, I wanted to know from people if they feel like they can follow their ambitions here in Italy or if they feel like they are forced to leave. These are some of the answers that I received.
I think I would have to leave Italy just because the salary is higher, so that's more appealing. But I think you can still achieve your goals in Italy. I mean, if you put your mind to it.
I think that for my field of expertise, I can accomplish also here.
Which is your field?
Medicine. But recently I thought about moving abroad because, like we said, the opportunities,
the salaries,
the experience of itself.
So definitely everybody thinks that if they leave, they will have a better salary regardless, even if they know that maybe in their particular field, they can find something sustainable. There's always that awareness that you're still getting something less than what you can get if you just decide to go and work abroad. But what do you think? How do you relate to these experiences? Have you or someone you know struggled with finding a stable job in Italy? Share your experiences and your thoughts with me in the comment section. Thanks for listening, Voices of Italy. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, and Facebook. See you next time. Before we wrap up, if you want to have a fun but sharp take on what it means to be an overqualified, underpaid young professional in Italy, I highly recommend watching Smetto quando voglio. It's a comedy, yes, but beneath the humor, it paints a painfully accurate picture of the struggles of many Italian graduates today, like some sort of Italian Breaking Bad, and it might just make you laugh while also make you think. Give it a watch and let me know what you think.